Several years ago, well-known Nephilim expert Steve Quayle broke a story about a giant that was killed in Afghanistan. And he had an interview with the pilot that flew the giant's body out on a C-130 aircraft. The story was covered on the net and on Coast to Coast AM with popular radio host George Norrie.
Back in December of 2008 in LA, Steve Quayle was on the program, as he's been so often. And he brought us that pilot anonymously. Pilot did not want his name disclosed. And he talked about this very bizarre story of how he flew this dead giant out to some base in Ohio.
Describe exactly what you saw.
Well, when we came up, basically came outside, we had a normal 463L pilot loaded down with what they told us was a giant.
On one of those interviews, he spoke with a caller who was in Special Forces in Afghanistan back in 2002. After the show, they talked for a long time, and it became clear that this was one of the men that actually shot and killed the giant. Then later, LA happened to meet another Special Forces soldier who could confirm these stories. Neither of these men wished to reveal their identity. We filmed them in remote locations because of their military backgrounds and the sensitive nature of what they're revealing. But both felt it was imperative to finally tell the truth.
You were in Afghanistan in 2002, and you were called into a very remote section of Afghanistan because a patrol had basically gone missing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Well, we just around nothing.
For miles.
Right.
So very remote.
Yeah, very remote. So we flew in. About 4 kilometers. We're hiking through the same area where they were supposed to make one of their checkpoints, one of their rally points. And before we left, there was all kinds of what happened with the ambush. But that was even odd because at the point of the ambush, you would call for maybe close air support, something. Okay. There was no calls made, just off the bridge. So we're coming down a mountainside, and it was a nice path, a goat path. As we bent around this corner, you could see this opening of the cave. There's a cave as we're coming around. And then I see there's a lot of rocks, which is another oddity, and then bone matter. When I'm not close enough to identify what kind of bones, but I did see something I knew was a piece of our communications equipment. So instantly, we're thinking ambush, maybe animal, could be anything. And there was enough room in front of this cave, but it had a sheer drop-off. But there was enough room that we actually got into a decent dispersal in case of ambush.
You see something coming out of the cave, and it's moving with a speed and agility that catches you off guard. Everybody.
And he comes out. It was a man at least 12 to 15 feet high. This is a monster. Red beard, then his hair was long past the shoulder, a scarlet red, and Dan runs at him and starts shooting, which broke all of us into the reality. Because it was so real.
Now your training is kicking in.
Oh yeah, okay. Muscle memory, complete muscle memory. While Dan is moving at him, another bro of mine's laying down fire, and I start firing. He skewers Dan. He's now got him on this pike. It went through him. He's still got him, and he's coming after more. We all just clicked in. I don't know what it was, but I remember we're all like, shoot him in the face, shoot him in the face. Our weapons components were M4, we had 308s, and we had Barrett 50s. This is sounding longer than it took. We're talking 30 seconds. And he's taking multiple hits, and is still moving.
He talked about this giant being 1,100 pounds, anywhere from 10 to 15 feet long, and it was killed. It was apparently shot somewhere in a cave in Afghanistan, but before it was shot, it lunged at several of our troops, our soldiers. It may have even gorged somebody. It was just a bizarre story, and it just sounds like the Nephilim from the Bible, doesn't it?
That's why we're so fascinated by this.
and people have a right to know about this stuff. I mean, if there are 15-footers or 18-footers roaming the planet, and our military has brought them down, I mean, we have a right as American citizens. I mean, this isn't classified military stuff. This is something that we need to know, and it points back to the biblical prophetic narrative. What are your thoughts on that?
I think here's my personal opinion. My personal opinion is if it points that the Bible is accurate, they don't want it. If it goes against Darwinian evolution, it's not to be spoken of.
So you're out in the boonies, running around looking for high-value targets.
Correct. Okay. And we're doing those operations, and as we're getting into firefights, we're getting into different scrimmages, you want to put it that way, we would come back to the base, and we started hearing this rumor about a unit that killed this, what they started calling this really tall person. At first, I didn't think anything of it, and then come to find out that the person that they killed actually was 3 times the size of a man, had extra digits on their hand and digits on their feet, and had red hair. And a special unit had come in and wanted this target. Well, we'd heard that they had killed this thing inside a cave, or the mouth of a cave. And it was common knowledge among the military to hear this.
And when you say common knowledge, what do you mean? I mean, how does that work?
Years later, to come to find out, when I had returned from Afghanistan and had met other military members that had not been there in the operations with me, if you would bring up the giant of Kandahar, they knew about it. When you first hear it, you're thinking like, this has got to be a joke. This has got to be a hoax. And then after things go down a certain way and you keep hearing it, you start to realize it's not a joke. They kept telling us to keep our weapons high, which means normally it's 2 to the chest, 1 to the head, but they kept telling us to put it towards a man's head and put it higher. So we would question, why do they want us to shoot higher than a man's head?
That's bizarre.
It is.
Our contact said 2002 is when they shot this 15-footer or taller, and you're now in this, you know, in the service around 2005. This word has gotten out, and what I find interesting here too is that if you're going to create a hoax, I get that, but you got details: 6 fingers, red hair, double rows of teeth, 6 digits on the toes, and of course that brings it right back into what we hear about in the biblical prophetic narrative, specifically the Nephilim. Your thoughts?
I agree. I would tell you that when I was doing my time in the service, and the stuff I saw, some of it I couldn't explain, like lights in the sky during firefights, like orbs, or lights that be the size of a softball that looked that size looking up in the sky but making weird noises. Going back to Afghanistan, we would hear these things. We would hear the locals talk about rumors of these giants.
What would the locals say? How would they talk about it?
They say that they lived in the caves and they would eat people. And
they were cannibals.
They were cannibals. And we, at the time, chalked it up to our United States as Bigfoot. And we realized that every culture had some kind of folklore, but to actually all of a sudden hear that a military unit had killed something.
And you have to assume that the giant is not alone, that the giant is not the only being living on this planet. There's got to be a whole school of them somewhere. You know, maybe he's got a female mate. Maybe he's got children. Who knows? Unfortunate that he had to attack our soldiers rather than be somewhat peaceful. But I guess that comes with the territory.
Dan was dead. Okay. And Wyatt is a good man, probably one of the best men I know, now dead. Before I'd left, they were already starting what they call a 9 line, which is a medevac request. They're sending out a medevac request, then all of a sudden it's not a medevac request. All of a sudden we had a helicopter show up because, like I told you, it was a large precipice and a sheer drop. So the helicopter just came up from the drop. They had dropped netting, which is like cargo netting. It's like squares. We were told we had to bundle him up. And we get another bigger helicopter, but it's almost like a Jolly Green Giant used to look back in the day that could get, you know, through this area. Because the mountains, you gotta remember, Chinooks could only go in certain places because they had enough lift. Mm-hmm. And so we got him on there. The thing was too big. We couldn't move it. It smelled worse than a skunk. A corpse that's been around for a while.
Really foul.
Oh, it was like a combination because of the... how do you put that, the persistence of a skunk smell, but once the helicopter came in, dropped its little hook, and off he goes. The communication was sent out that we had a very large, possible human creature.
There you are in the hills of Afghanistan. How many troop members are you with?
We had 6 on my crew. And when we say hills of Afghanistan, for us, we did not fly into the wilderness. We actually flew into a base. I guess this thing was transloaded out of the mountains by a CH-47. But I could see that it did have the 6 fingers. I remember taking my foot up and placing it up next to its foot, and it was extremely large. We estimated at about 12 feet, give or take. What I can tell you is the weight of the thing. Basically, it was approximately 1,500 pounds when it was getting on the aircraft. Now, if you take away the pallet weight and all the rigging that we had to hold this thing down, we figured it was around 1,100 pounds.
Of course we're upset. That's a given, okay? We lost a very good guy. But add to that, you're discussing something that even in our after-action report, they're saying rewrite it. And we had to rewrite it the way they wanted it.
How many fingers?
6 toes.
Six toes.
And the nails were weird because if you see somebody that ever has, I don't know what it's called, but it's
Like a fungus on
the nails, how they get pointy and they're like gnarly, that's what they look like.
Back in 2005, I was actually stationed or deployed to Qatar. It was a completely normal mission for us. We were not alerted for anything abnormal. It was in the middle of the day. I remember coming into a base in Afghanistan called Bagram. Back in those days, it was pretty austere. It was an old Russian air base that we were using. It's basically built in a bowl in the mountains where you have to stay high right up in the last minute, and then you basically come screaming back down to land. The area to the side of it was called the Valley of Death because during the Soviet days with the Mujahideen, they had fired their rockets into a lot of the helicopters, so you could see all kinds of wrecks and stuff in the valley below, which for the most part I didn't pay attention to because I was a little busy getting the airplane on the ground safely. We landed and basically was told to taxi to the very end of the tarmac. And like I said, it was middle of the day, very hot. I remember that. We opened the doors and unloaded the equipment that we had brought in. And then we were met at the aircraft by what we later on called the babysitters. But they kind of introduced themselves and said, hey, no cameras, nobody's taking pictures here. We're moving some high-value stuff. When the load got there, we're very, of course, curious to see what it was, because that's just the way you are when you're told that you're not allowed to have a camera. They say this thing had been dead for maybe a day or two, but it stunk. And when I say stunk, I've smelled dead things before, but this had a more of a, I want to say a musky stink, kind of a, not really a decay, but more of a, if somebody hadn't taken a shower in like 10 years type of a musky stink is all I can tell you. And it was basically a dead guy. And this guy was extremely large. And when I say large, our pallets are basically, if I remember correctly, about 9 by 12 feet or so. This guy was laying in a fetal position on the pallet. So he filled the pallet. We estimated his size at approximately 12 to 10 feet tall. I did see his skin color. I was expecting somebody of more Arabic descent, being in Afghanistan and all. I know he was dead, but he was very pale, very white. Another thing that us and the rest of the crew did was we took our feet. He was in a fetal position, so you could take your feet and put it kind of, you could see where his feet were there, and they were wrapped up. He did not have shoes on, but he had like, looked like he was wrapping them in some kind of a canvas type stuff, but we were sticking our feet up next to his feet, and his feet were extremely big. We know that the standard weight on one of those pallets is about 1,500 pounds, and I do remember that the loadmaster did the weights, and it was around 1,100-pound guy. The pallet sits on dunnage. You know what dunnage is? It's basically like railroad ties so that you can get a forklift underneath it and pick it up. So it was on dunnage, and basic dunnage is like maybe a 4x4. And then the pallet is, say, yay thick. It's actually aluminum and balsa wood. And this guy, I mean, laying down was very, very wide. I mean, and he was, like I said, he's in a fetal position, and you go up and you hit it, and of course he's under a tarp and all that, I understand that, but he was a dense guy. We questioned the babysitters of, hey, where'd you get this guy? And some of the Army guys that were with him relayed to us that this guy had, I guess, been living up in the mountains next to a village where the villagers basically treated him like a god. I did infer that they were making sacrifices to this guy because they said they found bones of people. The giant supposedly, like I said, I was not there, supposedly killed the first team that they came across. He was extremely big and fast and agile for a guy that size. They sent up another team, and when the second team went in there to get him, supposedly he had already started to basically eat on the team that had been killed the first time. They then grabbed a helicopter, and the helicopter brought him down where we picked him up. After we loaded the giant, it was just a standard mission back. We took him all the way back to Al Udeid in Qatar, where he was transloaded onto another airplane. I believe it was a C-17. I was done with my mission then. I got away from it. I was done. I did ask some questions later of, where it might have gone. And as the grapevine goes, it was probably taken back to the United States. And the words I heard were right, Pat. But again, I don't know. Several years after my deployments to Afghanistan, something very strange happened to me that is somewhat related to this. I was basically TDY to Kirtland Air Force Base, which is out in Albuquerque. I was out with my JAG at the time, and there was a Navajo Native American sitting basically in the restaurant that we're in. It was also a bar. It was actually Kelly's Brew Pub. And this Native American guy out of nowhere, he was talking to us, very friendly guy. And here's where it gets very strange. He started talking about, did I know that there were giants out in the Sandia Mountains? And he said, they're out there in the mountains still, and the earth had swallowed them up. And he goes, watch out. He says, someday they're going to come back. They're going to come back. I then took him aside and said, hey, as a matter of fact, I've seen these things. They're real. At least I think I've seen these things. And I basically conveyed to him the story. He just took it in stride and said, yes, they're real. They're absolutely real. And he said something like, if I remember correctly, like the earth had swallowed them up, but soon the earth will spit them back out. And soon, he said soon, they're coming back.
So I was doing a little research on Antarctica, which is, by all measures, a key puzzle piece in this end time, the revelation, the revealing of the truth that we're all a part of, that we're all working on right now. And we've all seen recently how all of the politicians are visiting there, the Pope is visiting there, Orthodox Christians from Russia are visiting there. Every major political and religious leader are making these mysterious trips to Antarctica. So anyway, I've been researching this a long, long time, trying to form my opinion before I actually started making videos on it. And that's not really what this video is about. What this video is about is just one little tiny thing that I stumbled across while I've been studying this. And it's this MyLab guy. And if you're MyLab, however you want to pronounce it, what it stands for is military abductee. There's just a lot of ways that these military abductees get enrolled in these programs. Some of them claim just through testing in schools or family ties and that type of thing. But more often than not, these are children and adults who were first involved in the cabal, meaning that they were either abducted by aliens and then subsequently abducted by the military to be debriefed or interrogated or chemically, with truth serum type drugs to be, they were once traumatized by the cabal, and then the small fragments, like QAnon talks about, these white hats in the military or whatever, or even more sinister ones, then abduct them a second time to get information about their abduction and their interactions with these Nephilim, demon spawn hybrid humanoid races. And other people they were abducted by parts of the cabal, like in the human trafficking rings and stuff, and then other parts of the military who are doing intelligence gathering on the cabal, then abduct them also, and they rescue them from these human trafficking rings, this deep underground stuff, not the stuff that we see, on the surface. I'm talking about the really deep, dark truth, So the kids and the people rescued out of those places, they're given new identities, how we do like in a witness relocation program. And so a lot of them end up in these programs like that, working with the military. Now, this video is about this particular whistleblower who is part of this program, who are one of these military abductees who were in these covert programs, and what he says about what's going on in Antarctica and below the surface and all this kind of stuff. Now, I want to make it clear, this is my disclaimer. I do not believe everything this person says. That's just a fact. And I hate to be that way because I absolutely know these people are victims. And the one problem that I really have with the whistleblowers, and I know they're victims, so I don't, I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm just saying that when they come out and they talk about these MK Ultra programs and how they were, programmed with these mind wipes and these slides, and they were drugged and made to sit in front of these movies to replace their memories with fake memories. And then they come out and, their programming's breaking down and they're on the circuit whistleblowing. It's just hard to know, even for them to know, which memories are implanted memories and which memories are real memories. So even if they're trying to do a good thing, they might really still be doing their job. They even say when they go out, on the circuit, they say things like, oh yeah, I saw, it's like Kathy O'Brien. Oh, she saw people be programmed to infiltrate the truth movement, the conspiracy theory movements and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden she comes out at a certain point in her life, her programming breaks down to a certain level and she's out infiltrating the truth movement. And yet it seems like the majority of these whistleblowers never come full circle. They will pour out a whole bunch of truth into the truth movement until a whole bunch of people start following them. And then they'll lead those people right into the New Age movement, right back in to, anti-Christ movements, and, you know, lots of different movements. We even see like Dr. Stephen Greer. He is at the forefront of this UFO research, and he has awesome research with the trace evidence, the actual science, all of that. But after you follow Stephen Greer, he leads you right back into channeling aliens. And, you know, as we know that these humanoid hybrids are the demon spawn, they're actual hybrids from the fallen angels talked about in Genesis 6, creating these many different species that are all humanoid, and they're hybrid beings from these demon spawn. But, you know, Dr. Stephen Greer, he'll lead you back to saying, oh, well, we can't see them that way. You know, we have to learn to work with them and all that, which kind of brings you right back where the cabal is. So anyway, one of the things that this Corey Good has been saying, and you can just Google his name and check out he has a zillion interviews out there, is he is saying that Donald Trump is not one of the cabal, and that he actually is fighting the cabal, which goes back to all this QAnon stuff we've been talking about, and the white hats trying to take down this cabal. Well, he says, and has been saying for years before Donald Trump was even elected, because I think he came forward in 2015, has been saying that they were desperate to keep Donald Trump out, even to the point of assassination, because he was not part of this cabal. So anyway, now I'm gonna play some stuff in his own words about stuff that he says that he has been taken many times by these covert agencies, not many times, but a few times, into the cities and the underground tunnels underneath Antarctica.
Under the ice, about 2 miles under the ice, there's a huge industrial complex, buildings all over the place. It looked very industrial, smoke coming out of them, steam coming out of them, very human looking. And there were giant submarines under the ice that had popped up that were the size of, I guess, the giant ships that carried the big shipping containers. It was huge, and I saw these submarines being unloaded with giant cranes that were reaching in the top that rolled back and pulling out these giant containers.
So when he said that about the underground submarines and going through these channels and stuff that lead all over the place, including up to the coastlines of America, it reminded me of this guy's dreams and visions that he had posted years ago. This is 2005 and 2006. That's 10 years before this whistleblower even came out. But anyway, he had seen exactly that. He had had these dreams and visions, these end-time dreams and vision about a nuclear attack. And you can see here, he drew it out. This is the cavern roof. He said there were marinas under there, and these there's basically warships and submarines under there, and that and then they had these openings. And I don't have time to look up all the pictures, but you remember seeing that over in Asia, that they had it. China got caught with those openings along the coastline that we took pictures of from satellite, and it was all the scandal. But that's exactly what he says here. It says secret submarine base, Russia, China, North Korea. I'll put the link to these videos so you can watch them. He's got a copyright thing on there, so he must want to keep them to himself or whatever, but I'll put the link down there. The second thing that totally reminded me of is that we have been talking about all this video right here I did, the FEMA barges, Google ships, mobile prisons. And I did a video about that, about how they were spotted off the coastline for years before they were in use. And it really bugs everybody that they're essentially made out of shipping containers. And they have little rooms in them, you know, almost like little hotel rooms, little one-room units, like prisons. You can click on the video. Please go back and watch it. It's a little bit startling. It's clearly a prison. They're clearly jail cells. But anyway, they're made out of shipping containers, so they can be transported, you know, they can be put on trains or boats, or, you know, moved around. They can be broke down into shipping containers, and that's worrisome to everybody. So when you hear this guy talking about the underground submarines, that these cranes came out, he said, and were removing shipping containers out of them, which leads us to this, my other video that I did that everybody's talking about this on lots of different videos. You can Google disappearing or vanishing people or where are the homeless going. 200,000 missing people, FEMA camps and all that. This video right here, that there are vanishing homeless people everywhere. And, you know, with the human trafficking, and if you get into the Nephilim and their practices, and I don't even want to say it because the Google bots will search my words and they probably won't let me put this video up. But you know, if you know what they say is going on underground there. But anyway, this video is about all of the missing people. And then this one is about the FEMA barges and the Google ships and all of that. So I thought that was odd that he said that about the shipping containers being taken out. Another thing, oh, I almost forgot. Here's another one that might pertain to those shipping containers. This is the Russian 3M54 Club K container missile system. If you've watched any of the Walmart videos about all of these strange shipping containers being put in their parking lots, and you'll see that people have brought this up pretty often about could that be what these are, that these missiles are being stationed all over America and they just look like shipping containers. And this is a real weapon. It's called the Russian 3M54 Club K container missile system. Okay, and this is the part where he talks about actually going through the tunnel system, and that part of the tunnels come up even on the coastlines of America.
We went over this sort of a bay of warmer water that was lapping the shores next to this industrial area I saw. And instead of flying in the direction I thought we were, we went straight down the way that these submarines came from. And we ended up entering this large rift system that is the West Antarctic Rift system or something like that. And we went very deep underground and traveled through this rift system that had been tunneled out by some ancient alien race that allowed you to travel from Antarctica all the way up to Central America and the southern and southwestern parts of the United States, all completely underwater.
Okay, now this next clip about the raptors, just hang in there. It's actually about this underground tunnel system and how that there are different species of Nephilim, some of them, you know, evil aliens and some of them good aliens, and the wars and stuff that happen in these underground tunnels. And if you're a follower of my channel, you know, like here's a video I did on that exact thing about this administration and all this QAnon stuff, all this stuff's going on, is that they're clearing these tunnels, that there's war going on beneath our feet. So this video, mystery booms, strange sounds being heard, worldwide solved, and all of that. So this one right here, please watch that, because it's not about a bunch of raptors or anything. It's about our U.S. military clearing these tunnels that are used for human trafficking and all of this other stuff. But it does touch on like Phil Schneider, when they said when he was tunneling for the military and they accidentally tunneled into a pre-existing ancient civilization, and there were these alien greys in there back in the 1970s, and that, you know, they went to war, and you know, Green Berets were lost and all of that. So, you know, we did touch on what he's saying right here, you know, and Philip Schneider said the same thing, not about raptors, but, you know, essentially the same thing. And then I did a more recent video on it. Here we go. New November 2017, mysterious booms being heard, and it's got the layout, it's got the map there with the layout of the underground tunnels and train systems and how they go across America. Please go and check those out. This one down here, actually I juxtaposed the sounds, tapes of these sounds. Now I'm not talking about the weird mechanical trumpets in the air, not those. These are actual explosions and gunfire being heard, shaking houses everywhere. And so this has the news clips and the actual footage of these sounds. This sounds like war, and I juxtaposed them against news footage of actual war, like from Iraq, and you can tell it's the exact same sounds, and people are hearing it all over America under their feet. So if you can get past this raptor graphic thing and listen to what he's saying that there are underground bases, FEMA camps, underground FEMA tunnels and FEMA bases that were supposed to be turned over to new leaders in these secret services and stuff like that when the new president took office, and there was a rogue element in the tunnels that locked them out. And so a war took place not between aliens and humans. A war took place underground between rogue CIA or rogue intelligence agencies and FEMA groups and cabal groups and this group of white hats, this group of good guys that were in these intelligence communities and in the Marines and in the military and in the, all these different agencies. So even though this graphic is about these raptors, listen to what he says, because he's talking about a war underground for these FEMA camps between rogue elements of the government and good elements of the government.
Well, the raptors were remnants of the dinosaurs, and they went underground to survive, and they're sort of a proto-dinosaur bird. They have plumes of feathers on them. They have real jerky movements. They're super fast, and they're carnivorous. So the incident that I was talking about that involved the Marines was not long ago, after the current president took over. Some of the bases that were built by FEMA but not controlled by FEMA were supposed to be turned over to the new leaders of these different groups under the new president, but some of them refused and locked the doors. And Marines were sent in to basically drill holes through these walls, cut through the rebar and steel, and go in and arrest these people. And if the people refused to give up, these Marines were ordered to wipe out everyone in the base. And in one of these occasions, they had to go in, and they were under orders to wipe everyone out. And in the battle, these Marines were shocked to become face-to-face with 8-foot-tall reptilians who were fighting them. And these Marines had zero briefings that ETs even exist, let alone they would run into them and have to do battle with them. So all of a sudden, they're standing there in front of the devil or a demon with the M16 doing battle with them.
Since we're talking about clearing the tunnels and everything here, I want to make a point. A lot of people, when they talk about the Raphaim and the Nephilim and these hybrids, they think about just like the giants. You hear a lot about the Nephilim and the giants. And yes, that's one race of Nephilim or Raphaim. And you know how we, earlier on my channel, before it got taken down, I had that Kandahar giant, where the military battled that giant in Afghanistan. L.A. Marzulli has it, Steve Quayle has it, so you can still find all the footage there with them. And then, like we've talked about, Phil Schneider bumping into the Greys underground and fighting with that Nephilim race. And then now I've just put up this about these raptors and the military battling with them. There's also been a couple of, besides just in the tunnels, there's apparently a huge cover-up of all the Nephilim races. So, if you followed anything about the Bigfoot and the Dogman encounters, you'll always see the same type of military cover-ups. Now, I've had a personal experience with one of these cryptids, and the same exact thing with the helicopters came in and weird stuff in the woods and shooting and all of that stuff. So I wanted to throw these two. It's just like 2-minute clips on each one, but I wanted to throw these in here because I want people to understand that the cover-up on these Nephilim races, that it's not just about giants and it's not just about alien greys, that there are lots of different cryptid humanoid hybrid races, and they're covering them all up. So anyway, here's a clip about the military and Bigfoot. They were on a marijuana farm doing a different military action, and they came across a female Bigfoot her foot was caught in a bear trap, because the marijuana farmers, they put bear traps and stuff out, to keep the thieves and the police and everybody away. And anyway, one of these cryptids, this Bigfoot, Sasquatch female, was caught in there, and her family was there surrounding her, had come to her calls. And that's when they had called in this team, and they didn't know what they were going up to battle. They thought they were going up to some sort of, drug farming operation, but they were actually brought in to take care of these cryptids. So this is on Brenton Salwin's channel, and he's got some great stories on there. So I'm just going to play this clip, and then I'll put the link below so you can go listen to the whole story. It's fascinating. It's really kind of sad. I'm not going to play it all because it's very graphic, and it's really kind of sad.
At this point, when he first said that, did you think that it was maybe people guarding the crop? Yeah, that's absolutely what I thought. I was in the commander's hatch, which is in the middle of the 113. My driver had his head stuck out of the driving, the hole there. And then we had two guys in the back where I had them open up the hatch, which is called a observer hatch. And we all had our CVCs on, which is how you communicate over, these armored vehicles are very loud. They're diesel. They go like, Wah! And so you have to have the CVCs on so you can talk to each other and hear each other over the noise. And so anyway, I told driver move out. So he moved out, and we pulled up there, and I said, driver, stop, turn on the lights. We turned on the lights, and I'm going to tell you something, man. I saw something that I never will forget. There was, Brenton, when you're seeing this, it takes your mind a good 30, 40 seconds to go, what is that? And then, you figure it out, and then they react, and then you react. So the helicopter's over us. They're blowing, and I'm asking them, can you back off a little? Because, he's blowing the marijuana leaves off, and it's dust coming up, and it's hard for us to see. So by that time, the Humvee had caught up to us, to the three guys in there, and then Deuce and a Half pulled up. And Deuce and a Half had the officer in charge. He was the captain. And I was the NCOIC, the non-commissioned officer in charge. So we're looking out there, and my driver goes, what the F is that? Imagine this, if you will. Right in the middle of this field, damn near in the middle, are four monsters, five really if you count the baby, that I never thought would have existed. But they were covered in hair, fur, whatever. And when we hit them with the lights, man, they were not happy at all. And state police said, go ahead and move in. And I said, what does that mean exactly? And the officer in the Deuce and a Half said, light them up, boys. And I said, roger that. So I said to the guys in the 113, I said, lock and load.
Okay, here's another one. This one was Florida, even though this is the Cryptid Brothers investigation out of Oklahoma. This particular incident happened in Florida, and it's exactly like what happened in Ohio, which was not even the one that I just played. It's really common. So these black SUVs show up, they call in these military units, and they go after these cryptids and remove them, which is exactly what this whistleblower is saying about all of the quote unquote alien races, that they have these teams weeding them out and stuff like that. So anyway, I'm only going to play about a minute or two of this hour-long story. I will put the link below. This is the part about the military coming in, but the story is about a Florida mother who shot a Bigfoot that had come up in her yard, and they had made the mistake of calling the sheriff's department and telling them, and that's when all of this started. So this picked up the next day when her neighbors their dog came up missing, and they were out in the backwoods. It was like 30 or 40 acres. Looking for the dog, but instead they got ran off of their property. They weren't even looking for Bigfoot and or anything to do with that, but because of the Bigfoot incident that had been called in, this military unit was in there, and it goes into, they recovered a body and all of this stuff. But this is, like I said, it's just a minute or so clip of them encountering these military units in there covering this up. And this is at a local level that they just called the sheriff, and then conservation came in, and then the black SUVs. And so this is nationwide, worldwide. They know all about it. The government knows all about it.
The neighbor's woods, only about 50 to 60 yards in the woods as they were walking, and they heard something at first, and then they turned and they saw, all three of them saw military soldiers with firearms walking slowly in neighbor one's woods. And my source said that there was about 10 soldiers. They were in fatigues, and they had their helmets on, and they were all carrying AR-15s. He said that neighbor one approached one of the soldiers who was kind of breaking away from the group to approach him. And neighbor one said, what are you guys doing on my property? Because neighbor one has his property posted everywhere. No hunting, no fishing. Because all of the livestock he has around his property, he doesn't He doesn't want anyone to come in there and mess with his livestock or his land. And the soldier came forward, was a sergeant. And he said, and he could tell from the patch, it was a sergeant, and he said, "We're conducting a military exercise, sir." And neighbor one said, "Not on my property. No one gave anybody authority to do that." And the sergeant said, "We can go anywhere we want, sir." And neighbor one said, "Who's in charge here?" So the sergeant said, "My lieutenant," who was up a little ways and came walking forward to neighbor one. He can see that he was talking to the sergeant. And he stepped up, and this lieutenant was a young guy. My source said he was probably about somewhere around 24, 25 in age. And he basically said he was a kind of a cocky ass, is what he said. And he spoke to my neighbor and said, he looked at neighbor one, and he said, "You either get off the property now, or we'll have to remove you from the property immediately." Then neighbor one said, "Who is your commander?" And the lieutenant didn't say a word. He said, "We will remove you if you do not leave now, sir." Now, what was very interesting, my source said, is that while they were talking to this military personnel standing there about 50 or 60 feet into neighbor one's wood line, some of the military, there was a military-like helicopter flying overhead and through neighbor one's woods.
So anyway, I'll just stop it there. But it goes on to talk about this, them being harassed, several of the neighbors, by these, sort of typical Men in Black types that pulled up in these black Lincolns and, would basically intimidate them, just intimidation and stuff. And, then it blew over and they moved on. But these couple of clips, hopefully suffice it to say that they know about the multiple races of Nephilim. They know all about it. I'm not sure if they know who they are or if they're deceived themselves, thinking that these interdimensionals are coming from outer space, because you hear a lot of that from the whistleblowers too. They won't go as far as agreeing with the biblical narrative that instead of coming from outer space and different stars, that these quote unquote aliens are actual interdimensionals, just like the Bible talked about, these angelic beings that shifted between dimensions and stuff, that these aren't extraterrestrials, they're extra dimensionals. And, these humanoid hybrids, these cryptids, are actual humanoid hybrids. And from that contamination of the human gene pool and all of these Nephilim, Raphaim races that it talked about, not just in the Bible, but in all of the ancient quote unquote mythologies. I mean, we know that the Cabal works with many of these alien races. So, and, they've exchanged technologies for back engineering and all of that type of thing. So I don't know if they themselves are deceived by these demons, or if they know that they're demons and monsters and they're just monsters themselves. A lot of they're psychopaths and sociopaths, they're monsters in the Cabal. So I don't know if there are elements of you can hear like the military and people involved in this. A lot of them didn't even know what they were being sent into. So I think it's probably so compartmentalized that it's a little bit of everything. I don't know. You guys let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your take on it.